we're going to move to our next speaker, and there will be a Q&A after this one, but I wanted to tell you all a little bit. I think most of you have seen Colonel Thompson's bio. He is also a North Georgia College graduate, but more important than that, he is the former commander of the Night Stalkers, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, which has an international reputation for being the best special operations helicopter unit in the world, and they prove it every day. Colonel Thompson was the commander during the Bin Laden raid. So he was the guy that helped to plan and execute that. And I think all of us are really excited to hear what he has to say. So John, you got it.
Hey, thank you, Skip. And thumbs up from everybody who can hear me well. Okay, awesome. Well, Skip mentioned that when a general, talks, especially when a Medal of Honor recipient talks, people perk up and listen. So, you can all lay your heads down on your desk right now. And in the event that I maybe put you to sleep with this, but hopefully not. But I do want to just speak a little bit about the mission that I was fortunate to take part in about halfway through my command tour in the 160th. But I also want to say that I am a number 3 in 4 generations of Army aviators. As some of you know, my dad 2-tour Vietnam, and first tour was with the 120th Aviation Company flying H-21s in 63 and 64, and then returned in 66 and 67 in Charlie 19 Air Cav, and was unfortunately shot down and killed over the Songray Valley. But just a great lineage. One that I'm proud of, one that I continue to be surrounded by his brothers, by his comrades for, throughout my military career, and even today, still very much keep in contact with all of his friends. And I'm proud and happy to report that my son now is a Night Stalker, 10 times better than I ever was at his age, and doing great things for our great nation. So let me start out. They say you want to warm up the crowd with a joke or some, or get them fired up, and I don't want you to misinterpret how I'm trying to get you fired up, but I do want to speak a little bit about how what the general mentioned about our last election, and I know it probably wore on your mind as heavily as it did on mine, but it did make me reflect back to being present, as I'm sure Maggie may have been during the initial elections in 2005 in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I was fortunate, or unfortunate, you may call it, to be present in the country during those time frames. I was in the conventional Army at that time, as opposed to the Special Operations, so I had a unique perspective on that. So just, if I may, a quick editorial note on voting, and given that this past year election was one like I never experienced in my lifetime here in the United States. I'm sure we all remember the first time we voted and hearing our parents talk about the civic responsibility behind that act of voting. But how many of us truly understood and appreciated the associated consequences of voting at such a young age? And as I've grown older, the act of voting has become more personal to me as it has increasingly affected my personal and professional life, and really the country I served for nearly 30 years. But it wasn't until 2005, while serving in both Afghanistan and Iraq, during their first elections after the fall of the Taliban and Saddam Hussein, did I truly internalize the intrinsic purpose behind the physical act of voting as it relates to the United States. And that is to protect and preserve life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And although those particular words were not associated to either of those countries' elections, that's basically what they were voting for. Some aspect of independence and the ability to have a voice in who their leaders are. I distinctly remember the level of planning that we would go through in assisting both the interim Iraqi and Afghan governments in selecting and setting up the various polling locations throughout their country, and then assisting with the security, but with a strong emphasis on ensuring that their police, their military, their government representatives were visibly present while we assumed a much supporting role. Was there violence? Absolutely. Voting lines were attacked by suicide bombers, vehicle-borne IEDs, and even insider attacks where rogue members of the military or police would turn on their fellow citizens. But in the end, elections were held, and their version of democracy came to fruition. And as I even tried to explain to some of my younger soldiers at the time, the act of voting should not be taken lightly, because it is the people who will ultimately suffer if such a right is ignored or infringed upon, or even worse, taken away. Now, I realize I'm preaching to the choir on all of this, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is this thing called voting and its importance to how we live our daily lives is the most important thing we do as a collective citizenry. And it's important, needs to be passed from generation to generation. Didn't mean to go off on a tangent, but given the turmoil over the past national and local elections, I thought it appropriate to address. So thank you for obliging me through that. So, okay, first a spoiler alert and then a upfront apology. If you read chapter 17 of Admiral Bill McRaven's recent book, Sea Stories, and I recommend the whole book, not just chapter 17, he tells a far more riveting story about the Bin Laden mission than I could ever deliver. And we don't have near the time for a blow-by-blow account of all that transpired over the preceding months of planning and then the mission itself. But I would like to share with you some of the challenge both I and we as a collective force faced throughout the process and how those challenges would help inform my transition into the civilian sector. Let me say up front that the mission itself was not considered to be overly complex from a tactical perspective. Reason being, because we had been conducting relatively the same type of missions for the previous 10 years since we conducted our first assaults into Afghanistan shortly after the 9/11 attacks. It was a helicopter raid, much of like what you participated in Vietnam. You brief your mission, you get on the helicopter, you get off the helicopter, you do your mission on the objective, you get on the helicopter and you come back home. You know, that was the major muscle movements. But there were a few complexities. The fact that the objective was in a so-called allied nation and the target was the world's number one HVT, and there was an established integrated air defense system that added to the complexity, and I dare say added to a little bit of the politics associated with the mission. The need for compartmentalization was of the utmost importance. And I won't get into all of the intricacies of it all, but I had to take from this highly skilled organization that numbered well in excess of 450 air crews and select just 6 of them that would conduct this one mission. My first step in choosing the crews was talking to the SEAL team commander, who I had known for years and had been on several deployments with. We discussed the pilots that he was most comfortable with and operated in that particular theater of operations. Because as you well can attest, an Afghan proficient pilot or a pilot proficient in the Afghani theater of operations did not necessarily equate to a pilot proficiency in the Iraq. Two totally completely different theaters of operations with regards to terrain. So then I had my lead pilot select the remainder of the air crews, but without the knowledge of the exact mission they will be conducting. It wasn't until multiple rehearsals did we reveal who the actual target was. And coincidentally, Libya was heating up about the same time. So that provided a very convenient cover story for all of our initial planning sessions. As I was going through the process of choosing the air crews, I reflected on my first day in command of the Night Stalkers. This unit I had had the privilege to serve in and command from 2010 to 2012 had lost 46 warriors since the global war on terrorism began on 9/11. And on my first day in command, the regimental commander is given this 2-inch thick binder that consists of all the Night Stalkers that have died while serving since the unit's inception in 1981. And on the backside of their biographies are all the relatives' names. And every year, on the anniversary of their death, the regimental commander would write a handwritten letter to each family member reaffirming that we will never forget their Night Stalker. Now, you may think that's a pretty grim reminder for the family, but in this particular unit, the families understand the sacrifice and are considered an extension of their Night Stalker. The thought of adding another name to the binder weighed on me heavily during the mission process, during the Bin Laden mission process. But there was an equal level of comfort I felt knowing there's no more capable unit, group of warriors with equally capable families behind them that could perform this type of mission. So as the intelligence built and we continued to rehearse more and more, we briefed our nation's leadership on the plan. Now, I mentioned earlier about the hint of politics needlessly associated with the mission. Well, as one would expect, it came from other branches of service and specific agencies that had their plan to get America's #1 high-value target. We knew that. And Admiral McCraven, for the most part, ensured the force was completely shielded from those type of distractions. We were extremely careful to not make any assurances that we knew could not be delivered. In the end, the national leadership chose our force due to the fact that no one else had the ability to not only mass the number of assaulters onto the objective, but to also have the capability to gather the right intelligence and the right evidence to prove to the world that Bin Laden was either there or not there. So the time comes to deploy to our forward location in Afghanistan and wait for the clearance to go. That was the easy part, since there was conveniently an additional 10,000 troops in the country at the time of the raid. We conducted our final map rehearsals, and the night after we get to our forward location, I received a call from my deputy commander saying, "Hey, something has happened back at Fort Campbell, and I'm going into work and will update you as soon as possible." And I'm like, "Great, that's all I need on the eve of this high-profile mission." So here I am, 1 or 2 days out from the mission that has us flying into, again, an allied nation territory without their knowledge. And I'm just told that an EF-3 tornado has hit Campbell Army Airfield and damaged several of our aircraft in hangars. Well, the damaged aircraft just so happen to be the ones that are prepared for alert to go anywhere in the world on a moment's notice for national importance. So you may be thinking, aren't you on a mission of national importance? Well, yeah, but when only a couple dozen people from Washington, D.C., and basically no one else knows you are, where you are you really there? I don't know. Needless to say, I told Vinny, my deputy commander at the time, to inform the chain of command and begin to reconstitute the alert package as best as he could. He began to do so, but mentioned that he may have to recall aircraft from overseas locations and crews, which may indirectly lead to unnecessary questions about what's going on in other places of the world. He was right. But in a brief moment of leadership weakness, which I experienced often, I simply told him in the calmest voice I could muster, and it probably came off more like a whimper. I said, "Vinny, just fix it. Just fix it." And he did, and I knew he would, because quite honestly, his capabilities far exceeded mine. And that's why I chose him to be my deputy commander, reinforcing the rule to always surround yourself with much smarter people than you are. A few hours before we launched on the mission, I spoke to the air crews and reminded them not of the national importance of the mission, but more so what it's going to feel like when they have their grandchild on their knee and are able to describe to them the role that they played in our nation's freedom and the privilege of serving some of the greatest warriors our military has ever produced. I concluded with an excerpt from our unit's creed that said, "I serve with the memory and the pride of those who have gone before, for they loved to fight, fought to win, and would rather die than quit. Night Stalkers don't quit." We've all heard of Murphy's Law, correct? Well, most elite units are not immune to having Murphy show up at the most inopportune time. But the great equalizer is we plan for Murphy just as much as we do plan for the plan itself. And that came in quite handy as the helicopters were approaching Bin Laden's compound. The lead aircraft experienced an aerodynamic occurrence known as settling with power, which some of you have probably experienced yourself, which basically means it was operating in its own recycled air, which causes a lack of lift. And the way you avoid that is to simply fly out of it. Well, that couldn't be done, or it would have been a waste of valuable time getting the force on the ground, and time was of the essence. So the lead pilot executed a well-executed forced landing inside the walls of the compound because he knew that was the plan. In fact, we had probably rehearsed that version of the plan more so than we did any other contingency. Needless to say, that raised a few eyebrows back in the Situation Room in DC and in the tank in the Pentagon where the drone footage was being viewed. Without hesitation, I sent in the additional aircraft with additional assaulters to reinforce the ground force and eventually exfil everyone off the objective. As I said earlier, we planned for Murphy. And even before I got on the radio to send in that additional aircraft, one of my other lead pilots had already begun to lighten his load by dumping excess fuel and heading directly to the objective. I realize all this may sound like a very bad day at the office, but I assure you that it is a special operations version of a well-oiled machine. With the additional assaulters on the ground, the objective was secured in a matter of minutes. But we also had to deal now with a downed aircraft destruction scenario. And from what one of the SEALs told me, blowing that up was the best part of the mission, which I mean, personally hurt, but I obviously got over it. So we got the bad guy, we got out of the country, but as the sun rose the next day, we discovered some parts of our aircraft were unfortunately left behind. And as you can imagine, this particular country wasn't too pleased, which made retrieval of the helicopter parts extremely difficult. The task of retrieving the remaining parts was fortunately above my pay grade. Agency pay grade, State Department primarily pay grade, and government to government pay grade. But we did provide the technical expertise to the various agencies that eventually were able to get some parts back. A few days after we redeployed stateside, we were paid a very special visit by the president and some key national leaders. And what was supposed to be only a brief meeting of thank yous and small talk turned out to be almost 4 hours, because Admiral McCraven, the SEAL commander, and I felt it very important that our nation's leadership hear specifically from the air crews and the ground force as to what exactly occurred on the ground. Because that served, and not only, what that was meant to serve is a constant reminder for all senior leaders, regardless of whether or not they wore the uniform, rely and trust the person on the ground. In the months following the mission, I'll be honest with you, there was a certain feeling of invincibility, especially given the fact that this unit that I was so privileged to have commanded conducted 6 other missions in various places around the world the same night the world's most wanted man was taken down. But that invincibility was abruptly ended by one of my commanders bursting into my office saying, "There's been a training accident," which resulted in 2 unfortunate deaths. That's 2 more names on our memorial wall, 2 more families without their Night Stalker, and more handwritten notes that will be written every year. There's another line in our creed that says, "And when the impossible has been accomplished, the only reward is another mission that no one else will try." All these experiences have shaped the person I am today. And when I took the uniform off almost 4 years ago, I assumed they would easily carry me through to my new chapter in life. I quickly came to understand that there's a lack of understanding, not out of spite, not out of ignorance, but within the civilian sector when dealing with those who have served, especially from my generation of post 9/11 veterans. We definitely saw this during your era in the post-Vietnam era. But the lack of understanding came from mostly the veterans' part, my part, in the ability to relate our experiences to the real world. The core values of selflessness, personal and moral courage, and respecting dignity formed the foundation of any good employee. As you very well know, as you hired your employees when you in your particular businesses. And just like military, the technical aspects of any job, flying a helicopter, turning a wrench, that can easily be trained and learned. But it's those core values that I mentioned that come with the veteran. My transition out of uniform was unexpectedly more difficult, but I was fortunate to have surrounded myself again with some very good people, primarily my wife, good mentors, and even some that sit amongst you today. And I listen to the guy and gal on the ground when formulating my plan to ease the process. So, gang, with that, thank you very much. It's always an honor to speak to such an amazing group of warriors. What you did for my generation can never be repaid, and a simple thank you is not adequate. But sometimes that's all we have are simple thank yous. And again, thank you. Thank you to you. Thank you to your families for the sacrifice. God bless.
Thank you, John. We've got some time set aside for questions and answers. So if anyone has a question for Colonel Thompson, let her rip. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Colonel. Yeah, this is Dave Beasley. I got two questions for you, actually. One of them is the parts from the aircraft that you lost. It was my understanding from what we saw in the press that some of those parts went to China. And the second question is I worked with Paul Martin at Lockheed during the Advanced Tactical Fighter Program. And Paul went on to be the F-117 program manager. So obviously he was immersed in stealth technology. And he went on to be president of Sikorsky. Did you ever have any interaction with Paul? Did he bring the stealth technology to Sikorsky?
Dave, I don't know Paul personally, but I had a lot of interaction with the defense industry and a myriad of them, whether it be Sikorsky, whether it be Boeing, and all the other integral players in helping that technology translate from a fixed wing high performance perspective to a rotary wing perspective. And I don't want to be evasive of your questions because some elements of the program are still very much classified, but it's an amazing it's an amazing partnership with the defense industrial side and the military side in making that happen. And I'll tell you, the 117 technology, I mean, and for those who are on the in this meeting, it's crazy to think that was late 60s, early 70s type stuff, if not before then. And for that to be as formidable as it is today is a testament to all those engineers who worked on that. And it was crazy guys, crazy stuff, crazy. And your point about fell into the other's hands, we saw the same thing, and we sort of got a chuckle at the end because from the parts we did receive back, the parts they got were not the most important ones.
John,
Thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir.
John, could you speak to what it takes to qualify to get into the 160th?
I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was a little bit easier during my time than it is. With the advancement of the aircraft, as many of you know, we have three types of airframe: the little birds, the old OH-6. We have the grandchildren or great grandchildren, if you will, from it's a McDonnell Douglas 530F variant of the 6. We have the armed version and the assault version. Blackhawks, both armed version and the assault version, and then the MH-47s. And uniquely enough, when I was in command, we brought on the Gray Eagles, the unmanned aerial systems. 2 companies worth now that the regiment has. So the green platoon, of which is basically our train up to become a full-fledged Night Stalker, is broken into several really 2 primary categories: the enlisted version and the officer pilot version. The enlisted version is a very intensive 3 to 5 month process, of which they not only learn the technical aspects, but are also trained in various special operations medical skills and a myriad of other things. And everyone goes to the SEER-C level high risk school at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The aviators, depending upon their assigned aircraft, will go through an intensive training program lasting anywhere from 6 months all the way up to 9 to 10 months, because of, again, the advancement of the instrumentation and the capabilities of the aircraft. Just to give you a little indication, we were fielding the MH-60 Mike, the most updated version of the assault aircraft during my last year in command. And on one of the initial flights, we were at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I picked it up to a 25-foot hover. I pressed a button. It took off by itself, flew a NOE route at 50 feet by itself. 30 minutes later, it shot its own approach back to Campbell Army Airfield and terminated itself at a 25-foot hover, and I never touched the controls one time. As you can attest to, that's very unnerving for a helicopter pilot to not touch the controls, and it defies science and everything else for a helicopter to do that. But that's what these, I call them kids, that's what these guys and gals are flying today. And it's amazing. And in that type of terrain, especially over in Afghanistan, that's what the ground force needs, that reliance to make sure that we're going to put them on the X plus or minus 30 seconds.
Yeah, back when you were a commander, you did me a great favor by you had your 3rd Battalion down at Hunter Army Airfield put a demonstration on for the Ranger Association that was having a reunion down there, and one of the aircraft that was put up for us to look at was the Chinook, and one of the pilots found out I was a pilot, and he asked me if I wanted to go take a look at the cockpit, and I said sure. And so we walked up to the front of that Chinook and got in the cockpit, and literally the only instrument that I recognized was the magnetic compass. That's how sophisticated. Well, not that I'm sophisticated, but that that everything else was TV screens, and was very impressive. And the troops, the people that gave us the briefings on the aircraft were the crew chiefs, were the enlisted people, and they were just so impressive. They were just so sharp. There wasn't anything that they didn't know about those aircraft. It was just we all walked away from that 4 hours with a real respect for that unit and for those troops. So thank you again for doing that.
Yes,
Hey,
sir. Very much.
Skip Glenn Carr has a question.
Yeah, Glenn?
Yeah, kind of follow what you said, Skip. I was reading a Army Aviation magazine last week or so ago, and I come across an article about the 160th, and it showed either 6 or 8 screens across the 2 pages of what they now have available to fly into a dust cloud, and you can see through the dust cloud of the aircraft in front of you as he exits the landing zone. My question is, knowing just what Skip said about the 4, I think it is, screens now in the CH-47, of every damn thing you can think of on that airplane is depicted on that screen. Now you add this thing to it. At some point, it seems to me like we're going to be overloading the human brain with stuff to see and to manage, evaluate, what have you. So, Colonel, can you speak to that? Are the kids? I use the term kid generously. Are they getting to where they get too much information in the cockpit, where it's counterproductive?
Yeah, excellent question, Glenn. And of course, my son and I have this conversation a lot because he's flying the aircraft that I just described to you that, you know, I flew for the first time and flew by itself. The goodness in all of this is that the regimental motto of anywhere in the world, time on target, plus or minus 30 seconds, still means something. And what most people don't understand about that is that the only instrument that these kids, and I'll use that term as well, are required to use during their mission training is that infamous HHM called a handheld map, you know, and so they go through the very rudimentary process because you never know when you're going to have a complete electrical failure, especially in the little bird, because the little bird, you know, you got one engine and you got one of a lot of stuff. And we still need to get to the target to either deliver rounds or deliver people to that target. Now, obviously, the bigger birds have backup systems, but when it comes down to it, the crews still possess the capability because they either have it right in between their seats, or they have it stuffed up under their left or right butt cheek, you know, with the course line, the time ticks, and the times that they're going to reach each ACP and the objective. And if the proverbial stuff hits the fan, that's what they're pulling out. Now, that doesn't, you know, that doesn't mean that I continuously give my son a rash of, you know what, you know, from relying on his computers, all that. And he just got back from Afghanistan, and I talked to him about a couple of missions because now they have terrain following, terrain avoidance radar on that. So, I mean, you literally, I mean, just like you said, they're flying into a mountain and to the side of a mountain, but the aircraft knows to increase altitude and go over the mountain, you know. So it's good, but you're right. It can also be bad, but they're doing everything to mitigate the bad effects of technology.
Well, you've just allayed one of my worst feelings. I often wonder how in the hell did we fight a war in Vietnam with a 1 to 50,000 map? But it looks like that's going to stick around for quite a while.
I certainly hope so. But I tell you, they got these amazing computers, and they got these amazing printers that spit out maps with course lines on it. And here I was with my grease pencil, you know, drawing on maps, and, you know, with my what's the flight computer, the W6B or what? I mean, the flight
E6B.
computer was, yeah,
E6B.
yeah, E6B. Figuring out my fuel burn.
Well, thanks for what you did, Colonel.
Yes, sir.
I've got a question.
Sure.
What was the washout rate of initial pilots into the 160th?
The washout rate was not near as extensive as the acceptance rate. So of all the packets that we receive that go through the initial screening process, we accept about 25% of the packets. And the washout rate is, I mean, we pride ourselves on picking the right people, but there are some that either emotionally, physically can't handle it, but it's well up into the high 80s and 90s for pass rate of people that we put into the unit after Green Platoon.
What is the biggest factor in the washout rate? Is it flying under the NVGs or?
That's a great question. It's really about trainability. If an aviator doesn't progress along the process of proficiency, whether it be gunnery or whether it be the ability to land between two buildings with inches or feet between the rotor blades, if they do not if they're not able to become comfortable with that, is really the deciding factor. There's very, very good aviators, and we try to during our exit briefs, so to speak, we reinforce that, because we still want them to go back to the conventional Army, 101st, 82nd, first cav, whatever, and contribute to the force. And most of them, 99% of them, do that. And even some come back to the regiment, reassess, and are very successful.
Thanks, John. Any other questions?
I had one a quick question regarding, I guess, the UBL mission that got such high profile so quickly. Do you think maybe it's because of the downed aircraft that they did a press conference so quickly? I just thought from an intelligence perspective, it would have been better to hold off and let everyone know we did that.
No, it certainly wasn't. It wasn't a result of the downed aircraft. I think it was more along the lines of the POTUS's speech in the minutes following. I mean, we were barely out of country, out of the target country when POTUS made his remarks. Right, wrong. We can argue over several cases of beer. Whether that was right or wrong. There's one particular individual on his staff that I'll take his name to the grave with me, but he ran his mouth more than he should, and caused some of the some of the potential fallout and follow-on threats against my unit and against the ground unit from nefarious actors that didn't need to be that way. I mean, our ability to keep a lid on this prior to the mission was amazing. I mean, if you would have told me right now that occurred, I'd have called you a bull-faced liar. I mean, no way that would have happened, especially with some people in DC knowing about it. But once that was, once it went down, I can see both sides of the argument as to, quickly coming out and announcing what happened, or keeping a lid on it for as long as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Folks, we need to wrap this up. We've got one more, actually, we've got two more speakers scheduled for this meeting. And John, thank you so much. That was really great. Appreciate it.